What monsters should I send against my party? Usually it's a question about my party is level 3, what should they be fighting? Or my party has been in this kind of a mood, what is a good monster for them? There's an answer in terms of if you're a level 3 party, you should be fighting things that are equivalent in that level. There's a narrative answer. There's a making this an interesting fight kind of answer. And then there's probably the best answer for a new player. And I want to differentiate between when a new player asks that question, what's the best answer, versus when a veteran DM asks that question, what are they actually asking for? If a player is asking just for inspiration is easy to give, but inspiration is best given with a little seed. Hopefully you're giving a little bit more context to that question than what new players are usually giving, which is no context at all. Sometimes it's literally that's the entire context. Like, I'm a noob DM, I have level 3 players, what should they be fighting? That's a big, there's a lot of options, and how do we narrow that down? First, I want to briefly dip into what that means narrative-wise. Picking your monsters has a huge impact on the narrative of your game. It goes without saying. Generally, when I'm running a game, what I like to do is create what I call a palette, a small little a note card or a text file or whatever, where I write down generally what inspires me to run the game and what themes and what tone interest me. So for example, if I were to be running a game, I might put in that palette Baron von Bad Guy the Vampire. That's one component on my palette. Another, I might put like immortality. I might put death on that palette. So those are the things that I can always go back to whenever I am needing inspiration, whenever I'm lost, whenever I'm not sure what I'm doing. And I can, at a minimum, just grab something from there. So for example, what I might do is if I was lost and I didn't know what to send them against my players, I'd look at my palette. I've got a vampire. That's a very, very straightforward. I could send a vampire against my players. I could send a vampire's minions against my players. What are a vampire's minions? There's a lot of options there. There's vampire spawn. There's a whole roster of undead. I could send mercenaries in the employ of the vampire. I could send other mystical creatures that are aligned with vampires, or maybe not aligned with vampires, but are in some way tangent to them. That gives me pretty good inspiration. Immortality, that is a bit harder to work with, but there are certainly creatures that you say immortality and they spring to mind. The first that comes to me are like inevitables, especially inevitables that are concerned with punishing people who seek immortality. There's like liches, that's probably extreme. And then there's death, and that one's a lot easier. The entire undead roster, you've got ghosts, you've got specters, banshees, creatures of the afterlife to be involved, so angels and devils and all that. The point is that you've got a palette, make your palette for your game. You can use that palette no matter what you put on it. You can probably derive some inspiration if you need to. Now, I will say, if you're drawing from your palette, that's probably not playing your A game in terms of design. That's like your minimum, if anything. You really want to be picking monsters that they connect to the story in some way. So you don't want to just pick random things just because you think of them, just because they're on your palette. Preferably, when you're making a game, you have an antagonist in mind. You want to be connecting your challenges to that antagonist in some way whenever possible. There might be environmental situations going on, like there might be a chasm, and that chasm is full of undead. That's just established. If the players are going anywhere near that area, undead are on the table. That's fine. There might be a force of nature at play. There might be a war going on. There might be like a prophecy. There's something that drives creatures to act against the party's interests. When you create challenges, when you create combats, using those as the basis for the combats builds them up in the world. So every time you fight undead in the chasm of undead, that establishes it as an important piece of your world. Every time you encounter like deserters, or you encounter like a military, like a scouting party, that establishes the war in your game. It's building up your world. Every time you fight the Baron's minions, that establishes the Baron as a challenge for the players to overcome. And it makes it all the sweeter when they finally get there. That is kind of the recommended direction you take when you're picking monsters for your fights, pick them according to your story, and make sure that whatever you pick is building your story, is establishing something in your story that's important. That is making it more present in the minds of the players. Any combat that's just, I don't know, some wolves happened, the players fight them and then the players forget about them. That's fine, but it's kind of a wasted opportunity narrative wise. It really doesn't take that much effort to tie that into the rest of your world. If you don't have a world planned, that's fine. Use this as an opportunity to inspire your world then. Randomly some wolves happened. Now it's time to think about, what's those wolves' story? Where do they tie in? Maybe they're like a forward presence of like a really, really dangerous forest that you haven't really thought of, but now is the time. Put it in the game. Players can go there. Give them a reason. Build your world that way. Let every combat be an opportunity for you to build the narrative of your game. Now, narrative is not the only reason to have a combat. More often than not, at least in my experience, combat is a mechanical challenge. The game expects you to put combats in front of your players. Why else would everyone have swords and spells that do damage and whatever monks do? I don't know. What's the point of all that if you don't have combats, right? Now, I will caution that if you're just running combats for the sake of combats, that's not good at all. Even if this is a combat-focused campaign, even if that's the only thing your players enjoy, you still want to do better than just randomly throwing monsters in front of them. Even board games put a little bit of narrative polish on what's happening in the game, and you should at least do a little bit. Don't just be like, yeah, you're in the woods, some wolves happen. That's a combat that the players will forget about, and that's not good. That's a wasted opportunity. Now, it goes without saying, we have to talk about CR, the challenge rating, which is the game's mechanical mark for you to figure out what is the most appropriate thing for your players to fight. Now, that comes with a caveat. A lot of veteran DMs out there have strong opinions about challenge rating, including me. I don't think it's a very good system. I don't think it's possible for it to be a very good system, because challenge rating is a mathematical formula. It's someone's attempt at turning the average difficulty into a number. And the problem with doing that is that it makes several assumptions that you can't rely on. For example, your players are a certain level. That's a fair assumption. And your players are equivalent to other players of that same level. And that's not a fair assumption. Two parties at the same level might be playing at different difficulties. So for example, if you're a new group, you got a fighter, wizard, cleric, rogue. Wizard might not have the best spells possible, and that's okay. The fighter might just be using whatever the game gave him. No one has planned anything fancy, and they'll perform at a certain level. And then if you pick a second party, same classes, same level, but the wizard has picked only the most potent spells in the game. The cleric has only picked the best spells for them. And the fighter and the rogue have like a combo that they've planned together, and they are really, really cranking out the damage. Those two parties need different difficulties, and you can't really express that via the challenge rating number. They're both like the system says they both need threes. They both should be fighting threes. It's not exactly what it says, but it's basically what it says. There's no real way to express that in a number. It's not an unsolvable problem. If the designers of Dungeons and Dragons really wanted to, they could create a more nuanced difficulty metric. They could have added a lot more bells and whistles to it and levers, and you can input like, my party has 3 magic items and this one has like combo mechanics that pair with this other class, and they're really, really using haste, and they're using their reactions every round, and then the system would spit out like, all right, they need to fight 60 giants. Good luck. The developers could do that. They haven't. At some point, it's a diminishing returns for the amount of effort that it takes to do that, and that is a decision that they have made, and I am not equipped to say whether or not it's the right decision. It probably is, honestly. You can only account for so much. The players are always going to outsmart you at some point. So the question is, at what point do you let it go? Anyway, so we've got a number. We've got challenge rating. That is your number, new players. Is it a good number? No. Is it better than nothing? Yeah. If you are ever not sure of what you should be sending against your players, look at their average level and compare with the challenge rating of what you're sending against them. And you generally want it to be within the ballpark. If the party is level 3, challenge rating 2 is okay. Maybe a challenge rating 4 if you are feeling really, really mean. Challenge rating 3 is good. That's advice that you will find very quickly becomes obsolete as you learn the game and as the players learn the game. Those numbers they're not perfect. they're not perfect. I wouldn't even call them good. That is what you use. Now, it goes a little deeper than that, because if the party is level 3, just throwing CR3 creatures at them doesn't make a combat good. You've got more work to do. Something that you really, really should contemplate is, what are the monsters doing? What is their goal? What is the party's goal? And that is something that condenses down into something called stakes. What happens if the party wins? And what happens if the party loses? Usually, if you don't specify, the default is the stakes are death. Whoever loses dies. That's fine, as long as you do that intentionally. What you want to make sure is whatever monsters you pick, the stakes are clear, and you need to make sure that your monsters are behaving in a way that is consistent with their goals. The other thing to consider with your from a mechanics perspective is that you need the monsters to be something that's challenging but not insurmountable. If they're fighting something that's insurmountable, it's not really thing that the players are participating in. It's more something that they're watching. It's more of a cutscene. And if it's not challenging, it's kind of the same energy where the players, they know they're going to win. It's not a question of are they going to win? It's a question of when. When is this cutscene going to finish so that we can continue on? It is not an easy thing to nail down. Challenge is very, very ephemeral. It is very fleeting, and it is something that even veteran DMs have a hard time nailing down. So you should not be ashamed if you are just starting out and you have no idea what you're doing. It's not a shame to be wrong. Don't feel ashamed to get it wrong. It's probably going to happen because it happens to me. I've been playing this game for decades. What is important to know is to have a plan for when it goes wrong and just keep on carrying on, keep on trying, because you'll get there. You'll get there. Every combat that you get wrong, it's just a learning opportunity to get you to the combat that is right, and it's absolutely worth the effort. And I don't really think there's an easy way to bypass that effort needed. There's no use bugbears at level 2, use dragons at level 6. If you do this, the game is fun, you'll have fun, blah, blah. I don't have that. Don't just take what I just said as useful advice. Make some combats. Some of them will suck, some of them will be great. And the ones that'll be great are the ones you'll remember, and the ones that suck, you'll forget. The other thing when designing a combat that I would recommend for new players, don't worry about it being fancy. Just make something plain to start with. Work your way up to the fancy. It is important to try and make combats that they make the players need to think about how they approach them. So if you can make a combat that really throws a wrench into the traditional combat style of hit it with a stick, cast magic missile on it, rogue sneak attack, blah, 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 that's a good thing. If you can add there's a pit in the middle of this room, and the ledge around the pit is actually very small, and now you've got to focus about how you're going to move across this terrain. That's more interesting. If you can make a combat that's about multiple dimensions and there's people on the upper floor, they're shooting down at you and you need to get up there, and can you jump? Can you fly? Can you backflip up the walls if you're, I don't know. That's more interesting than just here's some orcs on a flat featureless terrain, have fun. But when you're starting out, just start with the orcs. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's still fun. Now, getting back to the original question, when a new player asks me, which monster should I be using? I don't really have a good answer. I like orcs. That's not, you got to give a little bit more context. So what I like to recommend, and oftentimes new players don't have any more context to offer. So what I like to recommend is grab a pre-written adventure. There are free ones out there. I wonder if there's a free one here on D&D Beyond. I don't actually know. There are definitely free ones on the DMs Guild. Just grab one. Take a look at the combats in there. Don't feel bad about just stealing, especially when you're a new player. Just, hey, that fight looks fun. That's my fight now. Go nuts. Absolutely. Pick something, whatever inspires you. Don't worry about the players. Pick something that you enjoy running. and that will carry through to the table. So if you see a monster and it's doesn't really make sense, but it's the right CR and you can kind of make it work in the narrative and it sounds cool, go with that. The idea I like is watch D&D roleplay videos that I enjoy, take notes on what does and doesn't work. That's a great way. Yeah, watch other people's games and learn from them. If you see a fun combat, don't hesitate to steal it. Use it. Make it yours. Change it up a little if you want. Use it as is. It's fine. Just pick something that you want. And be prepared to be wrong. That's probably what the core of the question is at. Someone is asking, what monster should I use? Because they're worried that they might be picking wrong and they want someone who knows what they're talking about to step in. Just go for it. Just try it out and have a plan for when things go wrong, because they will go wrong eventually. You'll send a fight that's too easy. I do that all the time. Send a fight that's too hard. I do that all the time too. What do you do in those cases? Well, for the easy fight, you just move on and try again. There's going to be more fights in the future. For a hard fight, that gets into the topic of fudging. That gets into the topic of, oh, this creature had less hit points than you thought. Hastily change the hit points behind the screen. Or, oh, this creature had a really powerful attack. Oh, but that's only one-time use. Change it behind the screen. Those are tricks you learn over time. Have something in place. If a fight is too hard, you can also just pause the game, apologize to the players, say, I messed up, my bad, this is too hard. Take one unit, take a monster out of play, resume the game, keep going, keep the game going. That's not good, but it gets you through that combat, and they'll get it right the next combat. And your players will remember the good combats and forget the bad ones. You just need to power through it. What monster should I send against a level 3 party? Whatever inspires you. Whatever fits the challenge rating math, use that number. Whatever connects to your world, whatever makes your world feel more alive, and just pick something. If it's wrong, it's fine. We all make mistakes, and we're all learning. Yes. If you've got a question, feel free to ask it in the comments.